Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm your cat-loving host, David Bowles, and today we have a super special episode for you. A new book that was born right here with you over the last couple of years or so. The story that found its body. I need to tell you something about 4 disembodied cat heads, a puppy, and the problem of having a body. But first, I need to tell you something about stories. A story that exists only as a voice is a strange kind of creature. It lives in the air between the speaker and the listener, and when the speaking stops, the story has no permanent address. It has been heard, which is not the same as being held. It has entered the ear, which is not the same as sitting on a shelf where you can reach for it at 2 a.m. when you cannot sleep and need to remember that someone, somewhere, once wrote a sentence that made the unbearable slightly more bearable. A voice is immediate. A voice is intimate. A voice is also temporary in a way that a page is not. The voice finishes, and the silence that follows is total. For 28 episodes of this podcast, 4 cat heads floated through the universe, looking for their bodies. Captain Whiskerfluff, gray-furred and philosophically inconvenient. Lieutenant Mittens, ginger, who told jokes the way the rest of us breathe. Cookie Kitty, calico, whose opinions about soup could be heard across 3 star systems. And Skeedootle, who was not a cat at all but a puppy, floppy-eared and enormous-eyed, adopted into a crew of felines because nobody could justify leaving a creature alone in the dark. They lived here, on this podcast, in this voice, in the space between my microphone and your earbuds. 28 times we visited them. 28 times they argued and wondered and searched and did not find what they were looking for. Because the search was the point. And because finishing the search in a podcast that was also about consciousness and memory and what it means to be a living thing in a confusing universe would have felt premature. The cat heads existed as audio drama. They were performed. They were voiced. They were heard. And then they were gone. Living only in the archive, waiting for someone to press play again. They were, and I want you to hear this clearly, heads without bodies. The story about disembodied creatures was itself disembodied. I did not plan that parallel. I am not that clever. But I recognize it now, and I think it matters. Here is the question that started everything. If you remove a creature's body but keep its head alive, sealed inside a helmet that provides oxygen and treats, what exactly have you preserved? You have preserved the thinking. You have preserved the personality. You have preserved the voice, the memory, the capacity for humor and grief and love. But you have removed the means by which any of those internal states make contact with the physical world. You cannot touch anything. You cannot hold anything. You cannot stir a pot of soup, which, if you are Cookie Kitty, is not merely an inconvenience, but an existential catastrophe. That question, the question of what a mind is without a body, is one of the oldest questions in philosophy. Descartes tried to answer it by splitting the human being into 2 substances, the thinking thing and the extended thing, and spent the rest of his career failing to explain how they communicate. Merleau-Ponty, whose words open the novel as its epigraph, spent his career arguing the opposite, that the body is not a container for the mind, but the very medium through which the mind encounters anything at all. The body, he said, is our general medium for having a world. Without it, there is no world. There is only the idea of a world, which is a fundamentally different and fundamentally lesser thing. The catheads embody that argument. They embody it, which is an absurd verb to use for creatures who have no bodies. And I am using it deliberately because the absurdity is the point. They are funny. They are ridiculous. They are a captain who delivers monologues about cosmic indifference to an audience that did not ask for them, a lieutenant who deflects every serious emotion with a pun, a chef who communicates at a volume that could strip paint from a bulkhead, and a puppy who was separated from her body before she was old enough to remember what having one felt like. They are, in other words, recognizable. They are us. They are what we become when we lose the thing we thought defined us, and discover slowly that we are still here, still arguing, still stirring the soup counterclockwise, even though everyone knows it should go clockwise. For 28 episodes, that was enough. The audio format gave these characters voice. Literally, you could hear Whiskerfluff's gravity. You could hear Mittens' timing. You could hear Cookie Kitty's volume. Sound carried the comedy and the melancholy, and the spaces between the lines were filled with the listener's own imagination. But here is what audio could not do. Audio could not get inside those heads. Audio could not tell you what it feels like from the inside to remember warmth when you have no skin to feel it. Audio could not describe the specific quality of silence aboard a ship that has no name, because the crew argued about it so long that the argument itself became the name. Audio could not give you a narrator who watches these creatures with the tenderness and precision of someone who loves them enough to tell the truth about them, which is that they are broken and brave and exactly as confused as the rest of us about what wholeness means. Prose could do that, a novel could do that. So I wrote one. Catheads in Space. The body problem is not an adaptation of the 28 podcast episodes. I want to be clear about that because the distinction matters. The episodes gave me the characters, the world, the tone, and the fundamental question. The series Bible, which I built over 2 years of writing those episodes, gave me the rules. How the life helmets work, what the treat dispensers taste like, why the morale algorithm was eventually replaced by the treat ration protocol, which locked everything to standard and removed the last remnant of personalized care from the crew's daily existence. But the novel is new. Every sentence in it was written for the page, not adapted from a script. The reason is simple, and it is the same reason you do not take a painting and turn it into a sculpture by wrapping clay around the canvas. The mediums are different. What works when spoken does not automatically work when read. Comedic timing that depends on a vocal pause has to be rebuilt entirely through sentence rhythm and paragraph structure. A monologue that thrills when performed can flatten when transcribed. The page is a different instrument, and the honest thing to do was to learn to play it rather than pretend it was the same instrument I'd been playing all along. The result is a novel in 3 movements. The Drift, in which the crew loses everything except each other. The Signal, in which the universe offers them substitutes for what they have lost. And every substitute turns out to be a different kind of trap. And the Threshold, in which the bodies arrive from the other direction, having built their own ship out of claw marks, having crossed the dark independently, having refused to wait. There are 18 chapters. There is a warmth fog that wraps the crew in the memory of being held and nearly convinces them to stop searching. There is a sentient moon made of compacted cat hair that collects stories and rejects the ones that are hollow. There is a bureaucratic asteroid that requires forms, and the forms require bodies, and the bodies are the thing you are searching for, and the circularity is the point. There is a colony of disembodied ears living in resonance caves that takes Skeedootle's bark and keeps it forever, which means the puppy crosses most of the novel in silence, which means the first time she barks from a whole body in the final chapter is either the loudest moment in the book or the quietest, depending on whether you measure volume by decibels or by what it costs you to hear it. And there is a revelation in chapter 16 that changes everything. I will not tell you what it is, but I will tell you that the word quest means something different after you read it, and the word voluntary becomes the heaviest word in the English language. I said at the beginning that I wanted to tell you about the problem of having a body. Here is the problem. The problem is not that bodies break, although they do. The problem is not that bodies fail, although they will. The problem is that having a body means accepting that you are located. You are here and not there. You are this and not that. You are in contact with the world, which means the world is in contact with you, which means it can reach you, which means it can hurt you, which means every act of embodiment is an act of vulnerability that you did not consent to, and cannot opt out of, and would not trade for anything, because the alternative is floating in a helmet, thinking about stars, eating fish-flavored treats, and wondering what your own hands feel like. That is the body problem, not the physics question about how mind and matter interact, the lived question about whether wholeness is worth the cost of being whole. The catheads say yes. They say yes loudly, profanely, with a great deal of soup involved, and with the understanding that the thing they are becoming when they find their bodies is not the thing they were before they lost them. The novel calls this the doctrine of irrevocable change. No action can be undone, no loss restored. The bark the echoists took is never returned. Skeedootle's new bark is not the old bark. Reattachment is merger, not restoration. 3 versions of each being, the original who chose, the head who searched, the body who searched, combine into something none of them have met yet. That felt true to me. It felt true in the way that the best comedy feels true, which is to say it made me laugh, and then it made me think about why I was laughing, and then it made me wonder whether the laughter and the thinking were the same act, wearing different clothes. 28 episodes became a novel. A voice became a page. A story about creatures searching for their bodies found its own body, bound in paper, set in type, sitting on a shelf where you can reach for it at 2 a.m. The soup, by the way, goes clockwise now. If you have read the book, you know what that means. If you have not read the book, I will tell you only that the direction of the soup is the most important thing in the entire novel, and that Cookie Kitty has been right about everything from the beginning, and that the moment the soup changes direction is the moment you know that something permanent has happened, something that cannot be taken back, something that transforms the counterclockwise grief of 17 chapters into the clockwise wholeness of the 18th. Catheads in Space. The Body Problem is available now from David Bowles Books. You can find it at bowlesbooks.com. The 28 original podcast episodes that started it all are still here, still archived, still waiting for you at humanmeme.com. Listen to them. Then read the novel. Or read the novel first and then listen. The order does not matter. What matters is that these 4 heads and 4 bodies have found each other in the story and on the page, and the finding was worth every chapter of the search. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a perfect evening and an even barkier tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be a human meme.